This week, we release a new billet battery tie-down for the 3rd gen Honda Prelude, and we make big progress on Stacy's custom wheels. We picked up rim halves and our forgings, which I'm really excited to show you guys. So before I get into all that exciting stuff about the new wheel update on Stacy's car, let's start with this BA4 battery tie-down. So the 3rd gen Prelude uses a very similar battery tie-down to the EF Honda Civic. The Civic uses a Type 51 battery, and the Prelude uses a Type 24 battery. So most people are familiar that most golden era Hondas have a similar size battery, and it's held in by a strap that goes over the top and 2 threaded rods that hold it down. But the EF Honda Civic and the 3rd gen Prelude are a little bit different. A lot of the cars in the 80s had a strap that actually went on the corner edge of the battery and had 2 rods that went diagonally across and attached to the battery tray. So let's pretend that this is actually the corner of our battery. Here's the Honda Civic one. So instead of a strap going over the top of it and holding it down, on the EF and the Prelude, it actually goes on the corner of the battery, and 2 threaded rods go down at an angle this way, and they sort of diagonally pull the battery down into the tray. So luckily, because we had already designed the Honda Civic one, I had already tested this side geometry a bunch of times to make sure that I could get the angle and the pull down correct so that this wouldn't slip off or it wouldn't allow the battery to slide out sideways if you don't have enough angular pull on it. So I just brought that geometry into the BA4 Prelude version. So the side of this is actually pretty much the same. The biggest difference is the Type 24 battery is significantly longer than the Type 51 battery. Another thing to note is that in the EF chassis, the battery sort of sits vertical, like up towards the firewall, and so our logo is perpendicular to the side of the battery. But on the BA4 3rd gen Prelude, the battery actually sits turned 90 degrees from the way that it does in a Civic, so we just rotated our logo to match that. Also, since this battery tie-down is longer, it had a little bit more weight to it. I just put some pocketing in the top of it to reduce the weight. This Prelude one is actually lighter than the Civic one now, oddly enough. So let me just show you some pictures of the finished products, how it fits in the car. And before I forget, we're also including all the hardware needed to mount these tie-downs into your car. So that's our newest product. But what I'm really excited to show you about is our update on Stacy's custom wheels that she's making for her car. We took a trip down to San Diego, down to our buddies at HRA Wheels, and we picked up some rim halves and center forgings that we're going to use to create her custom wheel set. So last time we let off, we had just finished doing a rough design of the centers of Stacy's wheels. We 3D printed 4 separate pieces that we glued together to create one center, and that's where we left off. When I designed her centers, I had already taken measurements on the car to figure out roughly the rim sizes that we were going to need to get the wheel fitment that we wanted for her car. Stacy was very adamant when we started this project that the wheel fitment needs to be extremely aggressive. So not only did she want the offsets to be low so that the wheel fitment was sticking just outside the fenders, but she also wanted to push the boundaries of what the wheel widths were going to be. So with that said, I calculated a wheel width and offset for the front of the car and the back of the car that I thought was going to be pretty aggressive. What we came up with is an 18 by 10 in the front, around a 0 offset, and an 18 by 12 in the back with almost minus 20. So what I have here are some of the rim pieces that we've picked up. Now I'm very particular with the style of wheel lip that we're using on this wheel design. There's quite a few different types of rim halves that you can purchase when you're making your own set of wheels. The first thing to consider is the construction of the wheel barrel itself. The style that I like the most is considered a step lip. So the center of this wheel, this is going to be an 18-inch wheel, is actually going to be a 16-inch center face. And it's going to have 2 steps on this outer lip to step up to the 18-inch diameter. Off the flange is a 16-inch diameter, and then it's going to step up once to 17 inches, and then step up again to 18 inches. Aesthetically, this is my favorite style. There are a couple of other different styles, including a non-step lip, which you would have a 17-inch face with no step on the outer lip, and then it rolls out to an 18-inch. This is very common in wheel styles that you see from Japan a lot, like a Work VS or something like that. it's going to be a very flat lip that just has one step on the edge of it. The reason I like these step lips is because they add another facet to the wheel lip, and when this all gets polished, it really makes the wheel lip stand out and pop a little bit more. Now for the inner barrels, I chose to go with a rolled lip. The difference between the step lip and the rolled lip is that on the step lip here, as it's formed, the bead comes out and it ends at the edge of the wheel. On a rolled lip, when they form this rim halve, it not only comes over to the edge, but then the forming machine rolls the lip over and folds it back over the backside. What this does is it adds strength because the outside edge of this wheel is actually 2 layers of aluminum instead of 1. So what this gives us is a combination of a rolled inner lip for strength and a stepped outer lip for cosmetics. So the combination of rim halves for the front of Stacy's car is a 6-inch inner barrel and a 4-inch outer barrel. For the rear wheel, we've got a 6.5-inch inner and a 5.5-inch outer, making a 12-inch wide wheel. So all of these rim halves are in an unfinished state. They've been turned and they've been drilled, but they're in a raw finish. So after we machine the centers and before we assemble the wheels, these outer rim halves are actually going to have to go get polished first. So I think the wheel centers are going to end up being the same for the front wheel and the back wheel. I designed the wheel centers to clear her Nissan 300ZX brakes in the front, which is going to give us plenty of brake clearance in the back. So with the rim halves out of the way, let's take a look at these forgings that I picked up. So when you're machining a wheel center for a 3-piece wheel, you pretty much only have 2 different options for doing it. One, you can start with a billet blank. That's where you call your metal supply company and they just bandsaw you a chunk of metal that's big enough to make your center. Or there are companies that actually offer wheel center forgings that you can purchase. Now these are forged into a generic wheel center profile. This is about a 50-pound chunk of aluminum, and it's been forged into the rough shape of a wheel center that fits into the design that we've created. So they offer wheel center forgings in various different shapes so that if you design a wheel center, you can make sure that it's going to fit inside the shape of that forging. So as you can see, the profile of this forging is very flat and narrow because the wheel center that we've designed, since it's a very old style wheel, is very flat and narrow. And then on the back side is a rough shape of the hub itself. Now I believe this wheel forging can be made into up to about a 20-inch wheel. So when we machine our 16-inch center for our 18-inch wheels, we're going to be removing, I don't know, at least 80% of this material. So the next step is for me to finish the final design, make all of those small changes that I want to make, 3D print another center, one last time verify the fitment, and then I can start programming these. Probably the most difficult part about machining these is going to be the fact that I do not have any real tooling here to hold on to wheels. Now companies like HRE, they've got all types of tooling for holding on to round stuff. What they usually do when they have a forging like this is they'll mount it into a large lathe first, and they'll turn a diameter or a surface that they can hold onto in one of their mills. Whether that's the outer flange diameter that they can clamp on in a mill, or if it's the hub that they can clamp onto, something like that. Now I don't have a really big lathe here, so what we're gonna have to do is probably remove vices off of tables and clamp these forgings directly down to the table, and then I can machine something that I can hold onto on the backside in our vices or something like that. I'm not quite sure what I'm gonna do when it comes to fixturing just yet, but I think once I start programming, I'll have a little bit better idea of what that's gonna look like. So, since now we have the rim halves, obviously we have a 3D printed center, it just makes sense that we kind of put one together to see what it looks like. So I took the 3D printed center, I painted all the pockets black to kind of simulate what the wheel might look like when it's finished, and I put one of the rears together. Not bad. So obviously these lips are still raw, they're going to need to be polished, but at least now we can put this up on the car, we can mock the fitment of the offset We can mock up the fitment of the widths, make sure that we have good fender clearance. Actually, why don't we just go throw it on and see what it looks like? So, rear wheel fitment, 18 by 12. I think it's about -18 to -20. Because of this much wider wheel, Stacy's adding a rear over fender onto her car. These are from Fine Line Tuning. I haven't measured how much wider they are yet, but I believe it's probably about 35 to 40 millimeters. They're not installed, they're just taped on right now for fitment, but let's see how it goes. If you watched the previous video, you will have known that Stacy requested that these have an aggressive fitment. With that said, I made sure that they were going to fully fill these over fenders plus a little bit. Not bad. Sheesh. All right. Most likely when the car's lowered down, the wheel's going to camber in just a little bit, and we're obviously going to be stretching a tire onto this, but I dig it. All right, so here's with the shock unbolted and me compressing the wheel as much as I can. Now obviously we have quite a bit of wheel stick out here. What I'm going to do when I mount these over fenders is kind of give them a little bit of a pinch to flare them, maybe like another 5 or 8 millimeters. And then we can make up the rest of it with a little bit of camber and obviously a pretty aggressive stretch on the back tire. But I think that's kind of what she was going for. So obviously we still have so much left to do. The next step for me though is to completely finalize the design of the centers until I'm 100% happy, 3D print one last time to verify fitment, and then I can start thinking about the fixturing that I was telling you guys about. How I'm going to hold on to that forging in the first operation, probably going to cut the backside first, and then how am I going to fixture it for the other side? How am I going to hold the wheel, and how am I going to make it so I can make 4 of them easily? So obviously this is a huge step in the right direction, and I'm very excited to keep going with this project. I'm pretty sure Stacy's pretty excited about it too. But anyway, I'll see you guys next week.